Okay, level 2 is multiplying and performing operations with square roots. So we did a little bit of this last year, but just to remind you, when you multiply two roots together, you multiply the inside numbers together. So in this gray box, you see square root of a times the square root of b is the square root of ab. That means you can multiply those two numbers together. Okay? When you have the cube root in the next example, you can also multiply. So when you multiply, you can multiply the numbers inside together and you multiply the numbers that are outside together. When you divide, and they're the square root, like in the third example, the square root of a over the square root of b, you can write this with the big square root and just divide a and b together, but leave it with the whole square root. Okay, so let's take a couple examples here. I've got perform the indicated operations. So like I said, you can multiply the numbers outside together and the numbers inside together. So for notes purposes, I'm going to write all of this out. Negative 3 times 5, and then I have the square root 15 times 5. Okay, so negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, and then 15 times 5, that's going to be 75. And then I want to check if I can simplify 75, and I can. So that's another 5 and 15, obviously, because that's what I just multiplied together. 5 and 3. And then I'm going to circle my 5s. 5s are going to come out. So I'm going to take my negative 15 times 5, and then I have the square root of 3 left over. So negative 15 times 5 is negative 75, square root of 3. Okay, so if you are a little bit better with number sense, if you see at this first step when I multiply 15 times 5 and you see that 15 has another factor of 5, you can go ahead and take out that factor of 5 without like putting together with the 75 and breaking it down again. But if you don't see that right away, it's not the end of the world. It might just save you some time if you notice that if you're multiplying it by 5 and the number already has a 5 factor in it, you can take out those two numbers right away. If you don't see that, again, ignore the last 30 seconds that I just talked. Okay, number 7, remember that this little 2 means that you have to write this twice. You don't distribute it in. That doesn't work, and you mess it up more often than not. So I'm going to write this twice. So again, I'm going to multiply outside numbers and square root numbers. So I have positive 9. Now if you see 7 times 7, well, hey, Melanie, that's already a pair. So that number can come out, and there's nothing left underneath the square root that I haven't circled. So for this question, your final answer is 63. Okay, if you didn't see that those numbers are pairs and you would multiply it and be 49, you would break it down 7 and 7 and you'd go from there. But since I had two of the same numbers right from the beginning, I'm just going to circle them and take them out. Okay, now with division. Okay, this works both ways. When I have a big division sign, I can do one of two things. So the first way I'm going to write in red, the second way I'll write in blue. So the first way that I can do this is I can simplify, or see if I can simplify, what's underneath the square root, 16 over 4. So 4 goes into 16 4 times, and 4 goes into 1 once. Okay? And now 4 over 1 simplifies to 4. Now the square root didn't just go away, it's still there, okay? And it was here as well, but it was just simple. I was just simplifying. So when I square root 4, my answer will be 2. The other way to do it is doing this. If I have, here's my original problem, square root of 16 over 4, I can say this equals the square root of 16 over the square root of 4. The square root of 16 is 4, and the square root of 4 is 2. And now 4 over 2 is 2. So I arrive at the same answer. It works both ways. You can square root the whole thing, or you can square root the top and square root the bottom. It doesn't matter to me. I think both ways are as simple as the next. So whatever makes sense in your brains. All right, number 9, same way with cube roots, okay? If I have the cube root on the top and the cube root on the bottom, I can write this as the cube root of 128 over 2 and simplify the insides. So 128 divided by 2 would be 64. So now I have the cube root of 64, and it just makes it a little bit more manageable to break down. So 64 I know is 8 and 8, but since I'm looking for the cube root, I know that I've got to make some more pairs here. So this is going to be 4 and 2, 2 and 2, 4 and 2, 2 and 2. Okay, so I'm looking for groups of 3. So here's one group of 3, and here's one group of 3, and I've got nothing that I haven't circled on the end of the trees. So 1, 2 comes out, another 2 comes out, and so my final answer will be 4. Okay? Excuse me. So now I have number 10 left. Now 27 over 4, now that can't be simplified. So here's where I do have to split this up and say the square root of 27 over the square root of 4. And the square root of 27, it's not a perfect square, so I'm going to need to break that down into 3 and 9, 3 and 3. So here's my group of 3's, and that will come out. So I'll be left with 3 square root 3 out of that. But then on the bottom, the square root of 4 is 2. So I can simply write 2. So sometimes it happens where you can't simplify the fraction that's inside the square root. So you do need to do the second way that I showed you, like in number 8, where you square at the top and you square at the bottom. So I first like to see if I can simplify the fraction, and if I can't, that's when I have to go to the simplify top, simplify the bottom. Okay. All right, the second part in level 2s is simplifying the denominator. It's called rationalizing. So we're going to use this skill a lot throughout the whole year. You're going to need to know this. So when you rationalize, you can't leave a square root in the bottom of a fraction. So how you get rid of it is you multiply that fraction by the square root, both the top and the bottom. So in number 11, I have this 10 over the square root of 5. So I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by the square root of 5. What this does, if I multiply 10 times the square root of 5, it's just going to be 10 root 5. And in the bottom, remember I multiply the insides together. So the square root of 25. Well, I know that the square root of 25 is just 5. So now I can just simplify 10 over 5 to be 2 root 5 over 1, or you can just leave it as 2 root 5. Okay, but that gets the root out of the denominator. Let's try one more example. Okay, roots in the top are fine. It's the roots in the bottom that are not good. So the root that's in the bottom here in number 12 is the square root of 3. So I multiply top and bottom by the square root of 3. Since I'm multiplying and I'm multiplying 2 roots, I can multiply 2 and 3 together and say the square root of 6. And then I've got 3 times root 9. And then I've got square root of 6. And now 3 root 9. 9 breaks down into 3 and 3. So I have 3 times 3. So your final answer for this one would be root 6 over 9. That can't be simplified. Some of you might look at 6 and 9 and think, oh, a 3 can go into both of those, but they can't, because remember the root has the 6 has a root on it and the 9 doesn't. So I say they can't be friends. They've got to look the same in order to be friends. They can't be simplified. So if one has a root and one doesn't, you can't simplify them. All right, so those are level 2s. Go ahead and work on the practice.